everyone, welcome to this week's episode. I hope that last week's episode was encouraging to you on taking up sewing as a hobby. This week I want to tell you more about where you can get what you need to start this hobby, because there's no point of saying you're going to start sewing as a hobby and then you don't know where to get the things from. And I am also going to give you suggestions of projects that you could probably start with that maybe will encourage you to take up more sewing projects. As I had said in last week's video, I do plan eventually to start a box, a treasure box, basically a subscription kind of box where you can get something either monthly or every 2 months that you can be able to just start a sewing project, and it will probably have everything that you need for that particular sewing project. But I would definitely love to know if it's something you'd be interested in, and so that I can know how to roll it out, and maybe at some point I will do a survey once I have figured out what it will entail, and also the cost, because I also don't want it to be so pricey that it discourages someone from getting into sewing. But right now I just want to give you an overview of where you can buy things from, and some projects you could start with. And if you are comfortable doing it on your own, it's well and good, but there's also benefits of doing the subscription because you never know what you'll get. It's also just great for coming up with a very good community, sewing community. I would really like to make it a community-based thing so that you can encourage each other when you're doing your projects and things like that. So I guess I'll wait for your feedback, and I guess let us begin. So I will begin with a few ideas for sewing projects you can do. I am going to give you examples of both hand sewing projects and machine ones. The whole point is just to get sewing. If you really feel like you love sewing enough to invest in a machine, I think that's the whole point. And also I will tell you basically where you can get some of the things that you need. I have done a YouTube video before. My 2021 Vlogmas series was about sewing equipment that people usually use, and I did short reviews on that. I have also covered more about sewing equipment in last year's one of last year's series. I am just going to link them below so that you can be able to also have a rough idea, especially if you really want to go the professional route. Those videos will be very helpful to you. So I guess let's begin with some fun sewing projects that I found on the internet that you would do. Please do not follow the 5-minute craft things. I know they look very appealing, but a lot of them are just good videos that are entertaining. So I'm going to suggest some very practical ones. There are some very nice blogs that people have come up with that have very nice sewing projects. When I put the project up, I will also link the blog so that you can also check it out. I know sometimes the importance of being part of a community, which is why I want to do mine as a community-based thing, is that you can ask questions if you get stuck. Not everyone is very good at following instructions on a blog or even a video. Sometimes, yes, you may be fine with following those instructions, but sometimes you also just want to interact with people who are also doing the same projects as you. So let us start. I will give you maybe 10 projects and then we move from there. We are going to kick this off with hand sewing techniques, and we're going to start with embroidery. Now, if you're familiar with hand embroidery and not machine embroidery, you know that it really requires that you know how to sew with a needle and thread with your hand, at least. Basic stitches like back stitch, running stitch, at least if you know those two, you can probably learn some embroidery stitches, and it's very good practice just for your needlework. Of course, you'll need an embroidery hoop, which usually helps tighten the fabric so that your designs come out more level and clean. And you can see as you progress with learning more and more embroidery and practicing, your designs can even be more and more complex. So we are going to definitely start with hand embroidery. So next I'm going to talk to you about smoking. I know that some people confuse it with shirring, but shirring you actually use a machine to create. Smoking you use your hand. And it is a decoration on a garment created by gathering a section of material into tight pleats and holding them together with parallel stitches or ornamental pattern. So as you can see from the pictures, it's very, very intricate. And yes, there is a pattern that you actually follow to make sure that you get the design you want. And as you can see, even as the pictures progress, you can put them in certain sections of the garment. You don't have to put it in the whole garment. And the way I was taught in school is generally to do the whole technique in a big piece of fabric and then cut out with a pattern what you want, the section you want. But of course there are other ways you can do it, but it probably will need a lot of experimentation if you just do it directly on the garment. So this is a technique. It looks hard, but it's not actually hard. It just takes a very long time to do. So smoking is another one, and you also just need basic needlework skills. If you can knot and tie a thread together, you can probably do this. And of course at the end you can see that you can also decorate it with very nice beads. Yeah. Suffocks. If you have been my client for a while, I'm sure you have received or bought some hair clips that have this design. I really do love it because it's very versatile, and it's basically a gathered fabric that's cut in the shape of a circle, and you can cut it in different sizes and create different patterns with it, as you can see in the examples in the photos. And also you can use them on clothes, which is not done a lot, but it is very possible. It's very versatile and it's very easy. And if you know how to do running stitches and you can tie a knot, you can do this. It's not very difficult. And of course, you can also add beads and buttons to make them look a bit more interesting. And you can also make them more puffier by adding things like cotton or sponge in them. Tapestry. So tapestry or needlepoint is a form of counted thread embroidery. It's very simple because you have the squares to guide you and you can draw on the mesh. So the mesh come in different sizes as seen in the picture, and probably the most popular type of tapestry you see are these rugs that people make. But the one I'm going to talk about today is the flat embroidery type of tapestry, because I know there are people who don't know that you can use this mesh in another way. So from the pictures you're seeing there, you can actually use there's a tapestry needle that's usually plastic and has a bigger hole. Sometimes it's also metal, and you sew through it, and you can make diagrams and pictures from it, wall hangings, or just different mats, different types of art. But it's basically very similar to embroidery without the hoop, and very similar to cross stitching, which is also another popular way of doing needlework. Felt project. So what is felt? Felt is a kind of cloth made by rolling and pressing wool or other suitable textile, accompanied by moisture or heat, and causes the fibers to be constituent and matte together to create a smooth surface. So what I like about felt, and especially for someone who's beginning how to sew, is that it's pretty stiff and it doesn't fray and it's easy to sew through. And because it comes in many colors, you can do all sorts of projects with it, and you don't have to think about the finishing and all that. And it's pretty friendly even if you want to undo, and you can do all manner of things with it, as you can see from the photos on this clip. So you don't need to know very many hand stitches to be able to sew felt. You just need to know at least the basic ones like blanket stitch, running stitch, back stitch. You can also just use embroidery stitches. So you can see it's very versatile. Beadwork is basically a decorative technique made of beads. And I know that you may be familiar with beadwork that is done without the use of a cloth, mostly to make jewelry, but there is also beadwork that you have to sew on fabric. And yes, sometimes you need an embroidery hoop so that you tighten the fabric so that it comes out neater. So as you can see from the pictures, these are various types of beadwork. You can go as intricate as you want and as simple as you want, and you can actually even use different types of beads to come up with designs, and they are very, very popular on clothes, especially dresses for very special occasions. And there are some cultures that have a lot of beadwork generally in their clothes. Yeah, so beadwork is something you can learn, and most of the time it's just one stitch that you need to know basically how you're going to put it in and out. So before we get into machine sewing projects, I hope you noticed that I did add a bonus hand sewing project, the beadwork. So for the machine, I'd also do the same. I'll actually make them 6. And we start with patchwork, because patchwork is basically a project that will really help you learn how to sew straight lines and learn how to pay attention to detail, because there are very many ways of doing patchwork. As you can see from the examples there, you can cut very many different geometrical shapes, and of course you have to actually plan how you're going to put them together. And you can do very many incredible projects with it, and you can use patchwork to make things like cushions, bed covers, purses, pillowcases, and you can even quilt them. Quilting basically means running a thread across the patterns, just the way you see the last projects here. Cushions or pillows are something that I'm sure you're all familiar with, because you have them in your living rooms, on your chairs, and they're also a very good beginner sewing project, because it's also just about sewing straight lines. But the unique thing about cushions is that you can also implement some of the other techniques you've learned, especially the hand techniques, and also some machine techniques like the patchwork. You can also learn how to do some of the tucks. You can also use the suffocks. You can also use smoking, and you can do all sorts of things just to make your cushions more interesting. So definitely a fun beginner's project. Now we move on to aprons. Aprons are a protective garment basically that you wear over your clothes so that you don't get it dirty, especially in the kitchen when you're cooking. Of course, there are other types of aprons that you might use in a workshop, but these are the basic simple ones. I've started with the half aprons and the full aprons. And the beauty of starting with a project like this that is actually worn is that it's a very basic, simple shape that you can sew that doesn't necessarily have to have a lot of details. You can add details as you go, but it also helps you start understanding how to dress the human body. If you want to start making projects that are for the human body, this is a very good way to begin. If you live in Kenya, I am sure you have come across this bag. It's a tote bag. It's basically a large bag that is used for carrying items and basically mostly shopping. The beauty of a tote bag is that it is just as versatile in terms of what you can do on it, like the cushions, that you can actually apply other techniques you've learned to make your bags more interesting. And you can also just use leftover fabric and create patches and other things. And so the beauty of tote bags as well is that you can make them more durable depending on the type of straps you put or how you reinforce it. And definitely it does need some technique, despite the fact that it's made up of a lot of straight lines. It needs some techniques in how to put it together, whether or not you want to put a zip or not. And because it is a functional project, it needs to be very practical as well. So mittens or oven mittens or oven mitt are a fancy name for oven gloves or kitchen gloves. I guess it just depends on how you know them, but they are also a very good project. They're a bit more complex because despite the fact that you can only see two sides, it also has two more sides on the inside, and it has padding in the middle of each side because it's a practical project, but it also needs to be heat resistant so that you don't burn your hands. So it's very good, it's very easy because you can trace from your hand, or you can make the long versions where it just goes around your pot and you can insert your hands to hold it. But they're also a very good challenging sewing project because it also teaches you how to start learning how to do good finish. The bonus project I'm mentioning are table runners, coasters, and table mats. You can make them any size you want. You can make them in any shape you want. You can experiment on different types of techniques you've learned, from quilting to patchwork and many other things. But you also have to consider that it can't be one layer, it has to be multiple layers, because it also needs to be heat resistant, because the point is for it not only to protect the surface from dirt but also to protect it from heat. So this will definitely be a fun project because, first of all, it's multiple projects, and I know there are people who are very particular. They want it to be a theme, like the Halloween ones and the autumn ones and the Christmas ones and all that. And maybe even the theme could just be the colors and the fabrics that you're using. So definitely a project I recommend. Before I forget, as promised, here is a list of places that you can buy sewing equipment and tools in Nairobi. These are all in Nairobi, and some of the areas do have multiple shops, but generally this is where you would locally source your trimmings, your fabrics, just anything you need, even machines for sewing. So if you have the time, do check these places out. It takes time to really get to know yourself around, but it's definitely worth knowing. Take a screenshot if you must. And yeah, so just ensure that these are the places you know. So that is the end of this week's video. I hope the information has helped you figure out where you want to start, and please do start. I know generally starting anything can be difficult, but it's definitely worth it in the end. And if you have any questions, leave them below, and I will definitely answer them. I know most of the information I have given is for people who are based in Kenya. That's because I'm based in Kenya, and I don't know specific places that people buy in the other countries. But I'm sure, especially if you're in the East Africa region, it's definitely possible for me to ship things to you, of course at a cost. But that was the whole point of having the treasure box, because it'll have everything that you need. And also the point is that if you do get a sewing kit, you don't need to keep getting a sewing kit with every treasure box, so you only have the project. Anyway, all those things will be worked out, and I hope that eventually I'll be able to start this project. It's been on my mind for a while, and I guess the interest of it is what will really make me want to do it. And yes, I'm still planning on doing it because I think it's generally a fun thing. So thank you so much. I guess I will see you next week.